And we start our meeting off with a brief moment of silence. Give us all a chance to settle into our seats and get ready for business. And please rise for the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've got the full council present this evening, and we are starting off with a proclamation. Whereas the men and women of the Caveman Kiwanis Club of Kiwanis International have exhibited a deep sense of pride in the community by serving the needs of children and their families. And whereas children from Josephine County account for more than 2,000 visits each year to Dornbecker Children's Hospital, and many go to the Hematology Oncology Fellowship Program for treatment of this life-threatening disease. And whereas in the United States, cancer kills more children than all other diseases combined. Whereas the Pacific Northwest District of Kiwanis International initiated in 2010 the district-wide service project Kiwanis Children's Cancer Program, and whereas the program funds the Kiwanis Children's Cancer Fellowships at Dornbecker Children's Hospital, allowing physicians to seek cures for forms of cancer. And whereas the Caveman Kiwanis Club will collaborate and continue funding the Kiwanis Children's Cancer Program, and whereas the Caveman Kiwanis Club recently created the Caveman Kiwanis Patients Family Assistance Program to assist families traveling the 488-mile round trip from Grants Pass to Dornbecker Children's Hospital. And whereas the Caveman Kiwanis Club is the epitome of Kiwanis International's defining statement, Kiwanis is a global organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world one child and one community at a time. And whereas the service provided by the Caveman Kiwanis Club of Grants Pass will continue to have a positive impact on our community and children. Now therefore I, Sarah Bristol, Mayor of the City of Grants Pass, and on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of August 2021 as Kiwanis Children's Cancer Month, Program Month, and hereby call upon the citizens of Grants Pass to render their support to the members of the Caveman Kiwanis Club. And we have a large group of Kiwanis Club members here with us tonight to receive the proclamation. Thank you so much for all that you do. And did you want to say a few words?
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. Kiwanis has been involved with Dornbecker Hospital actually since 1985, just in the Portland area. And over the years, we've expanded it throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington. And then in 2010, we expanded it throughout the Northwest, Washington, British Columbia, Alaska, Panhandle of Idaho, Seattle Children's Hospital, and British Columbia Children's Hospital. So we're covering the entire Northwest. So I appreciate that. We'll be doing a few things here in town this month to publicize Dornbecker and our new assistance program. But I appreciate what you've done. Thank you. And our current president, Joan Collins, will accept the proclamation.
Thank you. You're welcome. If I may.
Thank you, absolutely.
Okay, I'm not used to microphones, so I guess I'll lower it so you can hear me. So members of Caveman Kiwanis have been providing funds to the Kiwanis Dornbecker Children's Hospital Fellowship Program for many years. This hospital, which is part of OHSU, has been doing amazing work. As you know, with the price of gas rising and families having other expenses, such as hotel and food, This can be expensive. As the proclamation states, we have currently created the Caveman Kiwanis Patients Family Assistance Program to assist families traveling to Dornbecker Children's Hospital for cancer treatment. Caveman Kiwanis would like to thank you for declaring August 2021 Kiwanis Children's Cancer Program Month to bring awareness to our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thanks for all your work on behalf of those families. I'm sure they appreciate it.
We will now leave you to your business.
Oh, are you sure?
Out there for 8 years.
We have 3 public hearings, and we're losing our public, but we understand.
Bye, dear.
All right. Next up on our agenda is a public hearing to consider a resolution adopting the 2021-2022 Annual Action Plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program. You all have a little packet of information with a paper clip on it. It goes with this presentation.
I should know this by now. This is year 2 of our 2020-24 consolidated plan, and this will be the year beginning October 1 of this year, 2021, ending September 30th, 2022. The subject is the Community Development Block Grant, the Year 2 Annual Action Plan, and the activities that will be funded in Year 2. Purpose of the meeting is, it is a public hearing per our Citizen Participation Plan, and a resolution needs to be adopted to approve the plan before we forward it to HUD. Relationship to council goals provides cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and community, enhance community safety, encourage economic opportunities, and I probably should be moving this down. Facilitate sustainable management growth, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. I've also handed out some larger handouts there as we go through the slides, the smaller ones, then you'll have the larger ones to look at there. The purpose is to provide flexible grants to assist cities, counties in development of viable urban communities by providing decent housing, a suitable living environment, and by expanding economic opportunities, principally benefiting low and moderate income people. Some of the major program areas are affordable and decent housing, addressing and preventing homelessness, non-housing community development and public facilities, economic development, public services, which are limited to just 15% of the annual CDBG award. This is one of the slides that I've given you a larger handout for. It outlines the national benefits, the percentages of where the money should be spent, and it's pretty explanatory. I've also handed you a larger document with our goals. This year we've been advised by HUD that we need to streamline our goals, our projects, and our activities to better meet HUD requirements. So that's what I've done with that goal sheet that you have there. Goal 1 is going to be for the affordable and decent housing, and Goal 1 will be affordable housing opportunities. Goal 2 is going to be prevent homelessness. Goal 3 falls under non-housing community development, which is supporting economic development. Goal 4 is one that I've incorporated For public facilities and improvements, we didn't really have an area in our last 5-year plan. It was kind of divided up into different areas, so I wanted to make it one goal, and then that way the projects and activities that we can have will be underneath that public facilities and improvements to those facilities. And then, of course, Goal 5, which I keep in here because I think at some point in time the city may want to do neighborhood blight and look at that and do a receivership program. So I keep it in there just for that. Of course, this is just a timeline of where we began in February of this year. And then, of course, we brought before you the needs and priorities in April. The public comment period for this draft plan was June 9 through July 9. And then, of course, tonight is the adoption hearing. Then I have a few days to input that all into the software program for HUD. And then it needs to be sent up to them by the 13th of August. October 1, the program year starts. September 30th next year it ends. This is also another handout that I gave to you. It's a fairly large printout. So it shows you the money that we were awarded and the different entities that the money has been divided up into. Of course, in the beginning of the year, you did the public services, and those funds are already, there was some back and forth as to how much should be given to each of the agencies, and it was decided in March, I believe, that we would divide it equally. So those show on here as equally divided in numerous areas. This, as I said before, is the second year of the 2020-2024 5-year consolidated plan. Any projects, activities which began in the first year of this 5-year plan, which are in progress, they'll continue into the second year for completion. And any funds from prior years, which we do have some funds that are still unspent from prior years, they will be spent down for those years and funded accordingly with the accomplishments for those years. The revenue source on this page, I have to, at CDBG funds, I have to apologize. I try to prepare my paperwork early in the year, and the $391,555 was what HUD had told us in the very beginning in the spring as to what our dollar amount would be. And as you can see, it's a little bit more. It's $397,324 is what they finally decided on. And that does show on your large Excel spreadsheet. And then, of course, if it changes again for any reason, then the allocations are all adjusted accordingly, including any funds that were awarded for public services. So tonight, the call to action is to approve the resolution. As I said before, the deadline is August 13 to submit it to HUD. They then have 45 days to review it and approve. If there are revisions or corrections, of course, then it comes back to me and I have to make those revisions and corrections before we can begin our October 1 year. The alternatives would be if you wanted to approve it with revisions. Of course, if there's any revisions, then of course that takes time to put it together before it has to be submitted to HUD. If it's not approved, then of course we do not receive the funds. So, any questions?
Thank you, Ann. Does anybody have questions? Rick?
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate the fact that you were able to send out a survey to maintain contact with the public during the time when so many places were shut down. Do you remember how many responses we got, and of those responses, was there a particular focus on an issue?
I believe at one of the exhibits to the plan, was the summary of the, I think it's Exhibit 1 to the, at the back of the plan, is a summary of the survey. And I believe that we had, this year we only had 28 responses. I think last year we had well over 100 responses, so I'm not sure why, you know, the discrepancy, but we only had 28 responses, and then most of that was for homelessness. Concerns are homelessness, permanent housing, traditional housing, severe weather shelters. They also were concerned about job creation and retention, employment training, and highest priorities, of course, were homeless services, mental health services, housing services, assistance with food, youth services, services for abused, neglected children, victims of domestic violence, and employment and job skills training.
Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Ann. Just a couple questions. The first one was, you mentioned that we have some unspent funds from previous year or years. Can you give us any idea of how much unspent funds from previous years there are?
Yes, I do. We have approximately 300,000 from prior years.
Okay. And then my other question is, on one of the categories, the affordable housing opportunities, there's a line item that talks about weatherization and energy efficiency. And I know we've talked about this previously, and that historically has been underutilized.
Correct.
And so I was just wondering if you could tell us, as far as the scope of what that line item could include, could that include the actual work that's done? Could that include the person coordinating the work? Could that include marketing that program to the public? I'm just trying to figure out what the scope of what that money can be used for that purpose.
My understanding, UCAN is the facilitator for this, so they're the ones that screen the individuals and everything. I believe with COVID and everything, that program stalled somewhat because we couldn't, it's usually done for individual houses and weatherization of those houses. They have to meet a certain criteria, and sometimes they're too old to be rehabbed. And then of course it's cost prohibitive because of the, you know, the repairs would outweigh what the home is really worth. In the past, from my understanding, we use just the funds just for the work that's going to be done, the weatherization and energy efficiency for those homes. There was no funds that were given to the operations, or like, I believe you're asking, like different individuals who work within UCAN or possibly other areas that way. And no, we do not. UCAN just selects the people. We go through the criteria with them, the environmental reviews, and decide if that home meets all the criteria that HUD requires.
Great, thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Anne, for that presentation. In that survey mentioned earlier, the top 3 community facilities most needed, one of them identified as childcare facilities, but I am seeing in the resource allocation that funds were actually moved away from daycare assistance for microenterprise, and we do know it's a pretty big financial barrier to starting a business, so I just wanted to touch base on that and ask.
Yes, we did have that in the daycare assistant. I believe we put in there in 2018, program year 2018, and no one used it. And so then in talking to, at that time it was through RCC, they ran the program through the Small Business Development Center. Microenterprise, they came to us and said, we need more money for tuition. So what I did is I moved it at that time to there. I did put in for this new upcoming year a little more money in there so that there will still be some daycare there if needed.
Wonderful, thank you.
Joel?
Thank you for the good report. One of the things I think all the nonprofits have been struggling with is the pandemic, of course, and employees, and the interface between them and the public to help the city and the federal dollars get dispersed appropriately. How do we monitor that performance, and what options do we have if for some reason that interface isn't working? They can't hire the people, or the front desk is still closed, those kind of things. And I understand that everybody's struggling a little bit with that, especially during the fourth wave or the third wave or whichever one it is. It's been my experience that when you have grants, it's expected that they're spent on what they're given for and not be held in reserve, and that's an appropriate expectation. And doesn't mean there's not extenuating circumstances that we've seen over the last year. We certainly have, and we need to understand that. So how do we deal with that in a positive manner?
Well, what I've done is I've reached out personally to each and every one of them, of course, keeping track of what's going on with them. Interestingly enough, all of them have been able to adapt and still make their, maybe not at the volume they were before, but they've still been able to, make some progress. And Boys and Girls Club has been one that was phenomenal in still being able to change things around, and they're on track with being able to expend all their funds, not only for 2019, but also for 2020. A lot of the funds for 2019 were definitely stalled somewhat, but the first of this year I worked really hard to make sure that everybody had the reports in, checking in with them to make sure that they had, what do they need? Do they need extra money, time, whatever? So we've made quite a bit of movement just these 7 months of this year. So I don't see, now with everybody coming back and more people opening up, I see there's a lot more movement, and I think that we will be able to expend most of the unexpended funds from 2019 and also from 2020.
That would be a great trend, and it's been challenging for everyone I know, and I appreciate their efforts and your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I just want to thank you and reaching out and following along with them, because there are a lot of areas that are struggling. So I just have a few questions on this, because you mentioned that there is money that's not spent. So if money from previous years has not been spent, does it stay in that particular category? Is that it was approved in, or how does that, I'm just looking at this chart and trying to say, can we see that on here where it is, or how do we know where it lies?
It does not show up on that chart. I have my own internal chart that I constantly track. One of the things that in discussions with our HUD rep is like the weatherization. We still have funds there where the program just did not utilize, and they didn't have the resources to do so. So once this action plan is approved and sent up to HUD, and once HUD approves it, then they have suggested that we go back in and make a substantial amendment and move some of those funds from those areas where it is just sitting into other activities that we can use for this year we're coming into. So that is what I have on my calendar to do once it's approved by HUD. And we can leave some of the unexpended funds program year 2019 and 2020 because those are still, some projects are still being done right now and they're not completed, so those will eat up some of those funds as well. And then we also have a fourth quarter report that's due the end of September, which will also expend some of those funds as well.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one other thing. We're always going to find our affordable housing chunks of money, and I see that one of the categories that we have assist in site acquisition in 2021 was $49,000, and then it was up this last year to $62,000. So has that actually been utilized, or does that accumulate pot-wise to move?
It's accumulating as well. We have unexpended from past years. We were hoping, and I know that we are working on possibly using those funds for the campground and seeing if we can use it there. We've had a response back that says no, but in discussions with Brad, I think we're going to push a little more and see if we can't possibly use some of those funds to help with that site acquisition. I don't want to get your hopes up, but it's, it's something that I think that we should be able to, but we're receiving pushback is all.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you for fighting and continuing to work on that. I appreciate that very much.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Anne. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this? All right, in that case, we will close the public hearing and turn it back to you, Council. TJ.
I move to approve the resolution as presented.
Second from Brian. Any discussion on the motion? All right, the motion is to approve the resolution, and DJ, you're up. How do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
All right, resolution passes. Our next item is a legislative hearing. So at this time, I will open the public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the Development Code Article 12, zoning districts, Article 19, a site plan review, and Article 22 for residential development standards. We will begin the hearing with a staff report, followed by public comment, and then the matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to consider this matter? Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? In this hearing, the decision of the council will be based upon specific criteria. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward those criteria. The criteria which apply in this case are noted in the staff report. It's important to remember that if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford the council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. We will now begin the hearing with the staff report. Hi, Brad.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. In this presentation tonight, I've actually hidden many of the slides that that you reviewed the prior public hearings, but just so you know, as I'm moving through this, they're there. So if you want to talk or back to some other information, we certainly do that tonight. Maybe another piece to point out is that the City Council and Mayor, at your last public hearing, you actually did close the public portion at the June meeting. So you continued it really just for the purpose of the council to have some deliberation and to hear feedback from Housing Advisory Committee. So this is the subject in summary. This proposal would amend 3 different articles in the Development Code: zoning districts, the site plan review, and the residential development standards. And the relationship to your council goals is to support the goal to facilitate sustainable and manageable growth by amending the Development Code to remain current with Oregon legislation. And here's a timeline. We started this journey back in January when we filed the application. Planning Commission had their recommendation to the council in March. The council's first public hearing was April 21st, and you continued that to get some Housing Advisory Committee feedback and to give you time to work with the material. Then on June 16th, you had your second public hearing and continued that to provide some general commercial lot data, which we've included in your packet tonight, and more specifically to get some information on the solar setback. That section of the development code was raised twice. Tonight is the continued meeting. So on the two items that you continued last time, the vacant commercial, general commercial parcels, we showed this map to you before. Let me just pull up this. So all of the green highlighted parcels, again, starting with the north end, I-5 here, kind of working down 6th and 7th Street, going along E and F, and then along the Parkway and Rogue River Highway. Those are all the existing vacant commercial parcels. So here's how they broke down. I believe it was Councilor Collins that raised the question, what are the sizes of these? So we did do that analysis. Of those 179 parcels that are zoned general commercial and are vacant, there are 35 lots that are 1 acre or larger, and that adds up to just under 78 acres. Between a half acre and a 1 acre in size, we have 27 lots, adds up to 20.46 acres. 0.25 to 0.5, there's 25 lots, which adds up to 9 acres, and then we have 92 lots that are below a quarter acre or below in size, and those add up to a total of 12.6 acres. So my interpretation of the way council was talking this last time was really kind of that last row, and so what about all these small general commercial parcels? Is that really feasible that you're going to be able to get some kind of triplex or commercial development on those? They're scattered, as you can imagine, everywhere throughout this map. So it's not like there's a concentration of them in one part of the city limits. I guess I just point that out because if you were to amend the code tonight and say, well, you want to make some changes to that, it's going to affect them in different quadrants and different sections, different neighborhoods. A couple of notes on that. The proposed ordinance would still allow triplex, just a reminder on that, as it's currently before you on these general commercial parcels. It removes the single family, the manufactured homes and the duplexes. And the triplex, you could certainly get with our current code, the off-street parking and the landscaping and a triplex unit is feasible, to get those on a quarter acre. As you know, obviously the smaller you get, the tougher it can become. So some of them are going to even be too small to do a single family house on. I mean, some of these are just remnant parcels that are, just left over from various property line adjustments and partitions. So I wanted to point that out. You could certainly, this is legislative, it's open for however the council wants to change the code. You could specify some kind of a small lot waiver to allow single family residential on lots below a quarter acre or, any other similar type wording. So the other piece, the reason you continued it related to the solar setback, and Assistant Planner Gabby Sinagra, she prepared a presentation for Housing Advisory Committee, made that presentation in July. And a few of the pieces that from our analysis about what's really not working in that solar setback are kind of listed here. It does have a lot of scattered and disjointed information in there. The language is ambiguous, and it does lack a kind of a multifaceted, innovative approach to account for the variety of stakeholders or circumstances and stakeholders around solar access. And it doesn't really provide provisions or directions when adhering to solar setbacks. There's a lot in that presentation. I'm just kind of giving the highlights, but those were, I think, kind of the salient points on that. We also discussed some ways to improve versus repealing the existing solar access ordinance, and some of those are listed here. We could consolidate that information into one place. We could create a user-friendly access guide, because right now it's almost like you need a math degree to kind of work your way through that section of Article 22. We could create and define solar zones, which is getting, a little bit more granular in terms of where in the city. Some communities do that. We could add a GIS layer, which would make it a lot easier to use, because right now we don't really utilize GIS in terms of the solar setback code. There is currently no layer for that. Ashland has a kind of a unique solar setback exception that we could look at. And then, of course, providing some opportunities to collaborate with private solar providers to better inform the public and the city on how we can improve that. So after hearing all of that information, the Housing Advisory Committee kind of discussed these main options: repealing the current code without an immediate replacement, which is what is before you already, or retaining the current code while preparing a code amendment to the solar section. So that would basically keep the current solar section totally in place until a new one is amended, kind of referring to those other bullets on the prior slide. And it's that second one that Housing Advisory Committee recommended to you. So here's some Article 22 amendments. This is the section that was, I guess I didn't hide that slide. I hit all the others. This is going back to kind of what we have in the amendment, which I wasn't going to review since you don't have a public hearing tonight. So those are really the main updates that I had for you. The criteria for approval are outlined in the findings of fact that the Planning Commission has. That's in Exhibit 1 in the packet. So as far as a call to action, you can discuss these amendments. You could continue it again. If you support the Housing Advisory Committee recommendation, you would, in your motion, need to include a specific section to retain the solar setbacks in Article 22.600. And then there's a potential motion there at the bottom. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Rick?
Thank you, Brad. I was wondering if you could clarify on page 76, it talks about amendments to Article 22 on removing the requirement to construct a garage or carport. Does that alleviate that development providing off-street parking, or those requirements still remain even though a garage or carport is not required?
Did you say 76, Counselor?
Yes. That second paragraph up from the bottom, last sentence.
Oh, yes. So currently, the Article 22 does not require a garage if you're doing a stick build, but it does if you're doing a manufactured home. So I can't tell you the origins for that, but this attempts to clean that up. Was that your question?
It doesn't bother me with a garage or carport. What I'm concerned, are the parking requirements still there?
The parking requirements do retain, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Valerie?
I just want a clarification on the motion that we're talking about, because as I said, we've hashed this over multiple times, but it was the solar that, in my particular case, I had the biggest question and concern about. So I just want to make sure that I understand what it is we need to do if we make a motion to adopt this ordinance is a cleanup. I want clarity on what, is it the one right there as opposed to what we have in our packet?
Yeah, I did add in here this phrase here, except to retain solar setback provisions in section 22.600.
Okay.
So, because if you did not include that, the application before you has that section completely stricken.
Okay.
So you need to give direction, the ordinance would be paired to not strike that.
Okay.
Other questions? Vanessa?
On page 87, under Article 19, Site Plan Review, it says 1 and 2 family dwellings that meet the base zone standards should be exempt from site plan review and go straight to building permit review with no public comment and no appeal, a type 1A review. It seems as though we would be streamlining the exact type of construction that we don't want to be streamlining just because of our housing crisis. Can you kind of explain that reasoning for that?
Yeah, it reflects current practice. You know, for those types of development, which is, you know, more than 60% of our residentially zoned land is built out as single family, and the housing needs analysis actually projects that to continue, you know, 60 to 70% to continue. So, in terms of building up an inventory of housing, the assumptions that we're still going to build out across the full range, you know, from the single family duplex all the way through to the higher density. So I think the purpose of that is just to ensure that the code's very clear. If you're coming in with single family development, you're just as streamlined as you always have been. You can just come in for your building permit. The site plan is done in cooperation with that building permit, and there's not an appeal. So I can appreciate where you're going, but it's really a reflection of I think both the housing needs analysis and kind of where we anticipate that. We did also streamline the middle housing a little bit more, because currently you would have to go through a whole other site plan process to do you know, a triplex. So we took that out. So it's handled just like single family housing would be, with just coming in for a permit.
I understand. Thank you. I have another question on that same page under Article 22, Residential Development Standards. The last sentence of the last paragraph, in addition, private open space such as decks or patios are required for each unit in all new multi-dwelling complexes. Do you see that being an additional unnecessary barrier to that high-density type housing?
You know, the majority of the multi-family residential developers are really already including like a patio on those, and that includes the subsidized housing too. If you look at, you know, many of those projects, they're still including a small space. This is a very small area that's in terms of the private open space. So we didn't see it really as a hindrance. I mean, it's really often put into those projects already. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Brian?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just follow up that point with like an scenario regarding the open space on the multi-dwelling complexes. Well, actually, it's more of like, say somebody wanted to build a multi-story apartment building where that requirement may be, you know, more difficult to comply with. Is there any sort of appeal process or variance that would handle that?
I'll have to pull up that section. There are some waivers that are built in that would not require a formal variance in order to get certain sections of those standards waived. You know, that could, as long as they demonstrate that, you know, there's a volleyball court, or there's a children's play over here, or, you know, the access to the open space is readily available in terms of how they laid out the site, you know, because that has a lot to do with it. And, you know, the goal being if you're a resident in one of these multi-family, especially as you point out, the higher density ones, that you still have readily accessible open space of some sort. And so you could lay out the site to do that. It would take me a minute to find whether or not we actually built that specific clause into that section. So.
We can go to the next person.
Are there other questions?
I'll-
Do you want me to?
Sorry,
you
was
have-
there another question?
I've got another one. I was trying to share. So back to the first thing Councilor Ogier said with the review process for single family, and then right after that it says all other housing developments classified as a minor site plan are suggested to be processed as a type 1C permit. And forgive me for not being as knowledgeable about these different permit types as you are, but could you kind of explain the difference between what that is and what the process above that is for single family dwellings, and how those play differently?
Absolutely. So the type 1Cs means we send out a notice to all property owners within 100 feet, and they have 14 days to comment. So before any decision is made, there's that 14-day comment period. On the type 1As and Bs, that comment period is not provided.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, and if you want me to
Yeah,
continue,
or
I
need
can do that while deliberating. But
Okay, well, I think Rick may have another question. No? Are there any other questions? Okay. So this is the one that doesn't get reopened to the public. So, okay, just on to discussion, I guess. Any discussion? Rick?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I move to adopt the ordinance amending Article 12 zoning districts, Article 19 site plan review, Article 22 residential development standards, except to retain the solar setback provisions in Section 22-600, first reading.
Valerie at the second. Any discussion on the motion? Brian, then Vanessa.
Just kind of wondering if I could confirm or deny that there was that appeal process built in before we voted.
Okay. We'll give it a little minute before we vote. Did you have something, Vanessa?
I think the information you're looking for on page 150, please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's talk about that private space beginning on that page.
yeah, that is the section, but that doesn't give us any guidance on the appeal piece. Is it?
DJ?
I'm not going to be voting yes on the motion. I was historically uncomfortable with the general commercial, but I've gained comfort in that. The solar setback requirement, though, I'm in opposition to, mainly because the appropriation of these funds were to assist Oregon cities in updating their comprehensive plan and land use regulations to promote housing availability and affordability, and to update codes to comply with state's clear and objective standard requirements. And by that basis, this is their recommendation to do so. Experienced in the industry, solar setbacks are a hurdle for development, and this has been identified through this, through Siegel planning. So I'm okay with eliminating the solar setbacks entirely.
Yeah, Rick?
In the interest of time, if it helps at all, if the motion were to go forward tonight and then later on we found some information that was contrary to what we thought should be in the ordinance, we could do a reconsiderations, and that would allow the motion to go forward. I don't know if other counselors would be comfortable with that or not.
Vanessa?
I don't know if it would be appropriate to ask that Gabby did, or if you did, Brad, but the presentation that she gave to the Housing Advisory Committee was wonderful, and I think the council would really benefit from hearing that information as well on the topic of solar setbacks, I cannot talk. The topic of solar setbacks.
Valerie?
I was just going to add that I would agree that they're pretty disjointed. I mean, it is, and I agree with what Brad said, that you need a math degree to go through and figure it all out. So I agree it's ambiguous and it's kind of crazy, but I also believe in this day and age with, you know, myself and everybody getting solar, wanting the access to solar, you know, the ability to do that, I think that it just needs to be amended. And that's why I support what they said. Let's keep it there and then amend it. So I don't know if we need to add to the motion that it will be amended, but I think that's part of the package deal. That the whole purpose of this is to streamline, and that's why we had the consultant hired, you know, with what went through several years ago, those of us who were on the commission, and we had DLD get involved with us not having and standards. I mean, I really understand the need to do this. So personally, I really want it to move forward because we have been dealing with it for a long time. So my sense is, yes, we recognize that there are some things we need to amend with the solar setback, but I think that's one small piece of a larger chunk that is clear and objective standards and streamlining so that housing development is easier to get. So I'm going to be voting in favor of the motion.
Do you have an answer?
My apologies. This
That's
is
okay.
there's a few pages here. So on page 140, there is 2 exceptions listed there under subsection 4. So lots that are a half acre or less in the R2, R3, R32, R4, R4, and R5 zones. Those actually have exceptions to those open space, and then the general commercial, central business district, and riverfront tourist mixed-use developments also have exceptions. So in those cases, those play areas and open space would have the flexibility of not providing those.
It doesn't speak to the private open space, though.
Correct. Yeah, that would require a formal variance in order to do that. If there's not an exception built specifically in like that one, they would have to file an actual variance.
All right, thank you.
All right, I think, was it your motion?
Yes.
Okay, and do you want to continue with vote? Okay. Does anybody have any further discussion before we vote? Yeah, I would say if you feel like you don't have a question, if you don't have enough answers, go ahead and vote no, and we'll see what happens. Rick, you're up.
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yeah. Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
No.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 7-1, but that leaves us with the second reading to do another night. Yeah, we'll do the first reading.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass amending Development Code Article 12 Zoning Districts, Article 19 Site Plan Review, and Article 22 Residential Development Standards as amended.
Thank you. All right, second reading, another night. It was not unanimous tonight. All right, moving on. Next up, we have a quasi-judicial hearing. This time I will open the public hearing to consider an application to vacate the common property lines between tax lots 500, 600, 800, 900, and 1,000 of map number 360519AA. This is the property most commonly recognized as Smoky Stoves. We will begin the hearing with staff report. followed by a presentation by the applicant, statements by persons in favor of the application, statements by persons in opposition to the application, and an opportunity for additional comments by the applicant and staff. After that has occurred, the public comment portion will be closed. The matter will be discussed and acted upon by the council. Is there anyone present who wishes to challenge the authority of the council to hear this matter? Do any councilors wish to abstain from participating in this hearing or declare a potential conflict of interest? Nope. Are there any councilors who wish to disclose discussions, contacts, or other ex parte information they have received prior to this meeting regarding the application? In the hearing, the decision of council will be based upon specific criteria which are set forth in the Development Code. All testimony will apply in this case noted in this report. If you would like a copy of the report, please write on a note to the city manager and one will be provided. It's important to remember if you fail to raise an issue with enough detail to afford council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The hearing will now proceed with a report from staff.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So this is a property line vacation between 5 different lots located at 926 Southwest 6th Street and on Southwest 5th Street and 930 Southwest 6th Street. Maybe more commonly known by you as the Smokies retail store. The application was filed by Gene Bradley, who is here tonight with us. The summary of the application, it would allow for the vacation of each of these 4 property lines that's designated. There's actually a 5th one here, a very small piece that is very narrow, but there are 5 parcels, and so the proposal would essentially eliminate the property lines that have been there for many years between all of those. The purpose for this is to allow for some additional building and or development flexibility. The code does not allow for buildings to cross property lines. It doesn't allow for utilities to cross property lines. All 5 parcels are owned by the same party. So this would put that all under single boundary. Here is a image from 6th, kind of right there at the Smokies parking lot. That's one area. This is just a zoomed in close version. Maybe you can see the buildings that are there today. There's some parking and storage in the back off of 5th. Here's the 2 criterion for approval for a property line vacation. The property configuration doesn't create a substandard condition. Today, the substandard condition actually exists. So by eliminating the property lines, you actually improve that conformity. And then number 2, the proposal is not contrary to public health, safety, welfare, convenience, or any other purpose of Article 17. And staff finds both of those to be true. And we did not receive any public comments when we sent this application out. And here is the call to action. You have to make a decision no later than October 15th, but you can make it tonight. The vacation would become final within 30 days if you were to make a decision. And the recommended motion is there.
Any questions? DJ?
Yeah, you had mentioned that currently today that substandard conditions may exist. Can you elaborate on that, aside from the obvious 5th little lot there? What kind of substandard conditions do you see?
The building setbacks is really the main one. There's several of the builds here on the property, didn't meet the setbacks, may even encroach over the property line. So, and the advantage, if you remove those lines, then any new buildings also don't have to meet. For example, if you were to come in and build on this piece, you'd have to have a 10-foot setback. And so if that's removed, that line, you would no longer have that setback to work with. So.
That's good enough for me, thank you.
Rick?
Brad, on elaborating what DJ said, when those lines are removed, does that require a survey?
Our code does not require a survey to proceed with a property line vacation. Obviously, there is a new legal description that defines the new exterior boundary. Because today the legal description, you have 5 different legal descriptions, and so there would have to be a new one, so that from a Josephine County tax assessment standpoint, they would now only send, one tax bill.
So the purpose of my question is if they're aware that one of the buildings protrudes beyond the external property line, would it be appropriate for them to try and modify that description at this time to clear up the record? But it's not a requirement, is what you're saying.
It is not a requirement. Is it a good idea? I would say yes. If you're already in the process of creating that description.
Valerie?
But it's not a city requirement.
Yeah, I just as a historical question, because we have a lot of these, so I'm always kind of wondering, is this because when, say, he bought one of the pieces of property or whatever, bought items, there was no code at the time, and since then that's changed, that's why now you're kind of going back cleaning things up? Am I correct in that assumption?
I would be making the same assumption as you. We didn't do that research, but I mean, that is certainly, the case. We have, a zoning code to speak of. I know sometime in the late 60s, early 70s. So
That's what I was curious about, is when the code came about. So that's close. Thank you.
DJ?
Just wanted to follow with you, Rick. I think it's the council prerogative to, if wish to, require a civil property line management application with a survey and recording of plat. We wanted to, but I think it's a prescriptive path requirement.
Any other questions for Brad? No? Okay. The applicant, would you like to speak? Well, you don't have to, but you have the opportunity if you'd like to.
Well, I just basically came down to watch the process. I can really imagine why anybody would object to removing the boundary lines. I didn't realize when I bought it was 5 parcels, but nevertheless, and by removing them, it just allows me to put up another big storage building on the back, and I'm always needing to get stuff out of the weather, and so that was the purpose. And when they told me I could vacate the lines, that's why I just applied for it, and kind of leaving it up to the process.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who wanted to speak on this issue? All right, in that case, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to the council. And Valerie?
Yes, I agree with you. It's just a process that needs to happen, so let's push it through. So I move to approve the ordinance vacating the property lines between tax lots 500, 600, 800, 900, and 1,000 of map number 36-05-1A-AA, first reading.
Thank you. And DJ had the second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right. In that case, Valerie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
All right.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 500, 600, 800, 900, and 1,000 of map number 360519AA.
Thank you. Brian?
I move to approve the ordinance vacating the property lines between tax lots 500, 600, 800, 900, and 1,000 of map number 36-05-19-AA, second reading.
Thank you. DJ with the second. And let's see, Brian, how do you vote?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass vacating the common property lines between tax lots 500, 600, 800, 900, and 1,000 of map number 360519AA.
Thank you. Had a personal goal tonight of not forgetting that second reading either, so mission accomplished, huh? All right.
I thank you all for your consideration, and
Thank you. All right. Next up, council action item to consider resolution authorizing a transfer of appropriations for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. And it looks like our finance director, Adam. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I think I have a pretty simple presentation for you today. I'm presenting a resolution authorizing a transfer of appropriations for FY22. This particular resolution would transfer funds from wastewater contingency into the wastewater treatment department. And the relationship to your council goals is to provide cooperative shared leadership involving council staff and the community. A transfer of appropriations is the simplest form of budget adjustment that can be made during the fiscal year, and according to state law, can be done with a resolution as long as we state the need, the purpose of the expenditure, and the amount of that transfer. This proposed resolution and appropriation transfer would move $38,000 from contingency to wastewater treatment, all within the wastewater fund. The need is that a wastewater pump rebuild that was budgeted for and scheduled to be completed in FY21 didn't quite get all the way completed until after June 30th, which means there's a portion of that rebuild that becomes an FY22 expenditure. And the FY22 budget didn't budget for that extra expenditure in this year. The purpose of this transfer would provide the wastewater fund and wastewater treatment department the flexibility to pay for that transfer and also maintain their current maintenance schedule. Here's a quick summary of the changes. This is just as you see in that current column, that is the amount of appropriations that was adopted in Resolution 21-7066, which is also on page 104 of our adopted budget document. And you can see that adjustment just moving that $38,000. The total wastewater fund appropriation is not changing at all. That stays at that $10.6 million. As far as a cost implication, there is no real cost implication for the wastewater fund because they would have been spent in 21. So because they weren't, there's more ending fund balance, and now we're going to spend that specifically on what they were budgeted to be spent. The one side effect of this transfer is that by reducing that contingency number from 1.74 to 1.71, there is technically less available for you to make an adjustment throughout the year as needed, but 1.7 is still a pretty good number to play with. Your call to action is tonight, but that is at your discretion. That's just talking about the timing and restating what I've already said. Your alternatives are to approve the budget adjustment as presented or as amended, or you could not approve the budget adjustment, and there's a sample motion for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions, council? No? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this? No? All right. Coming back around, council. DJ?
I move to approve the budget adjustment as recommended.
Second from Valerie. Any discussion on the motion? All right. The motion was to approve. And DJ, you're ready to vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian? All right. That was easy peasy. Next up, consideration of a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Josephine County to receive destination marketing organization funding support. And it looks like Aaron Kubik is going to be presenting.
You did? Yeah, I gotta do that. Yeah. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of the public. This topic is an intergovernmental with Josephine County to receive destination funding support. Relationship to council goals is it does support your goal of encourage economic opportunities. Objective 1, to facilitate an environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities. So just a quick background slide. In November 18 of 2020, council approved a resolution to form a starter board of directors for a destination marketing organization. And in May of 2021, you entered into a contract with that marketing organization. Since that time, the Board of Commissioners has shown an interest and has discussed this with the council president and the mayor in some of their meetings and wanted to partner with the city in some form or fashion to help with destination marketing. They did have a discussion, and their initial agreement which is in front of you today, is to provide the city with $30,000 to be forwarded to the destination marketing organization to help with travel and tourism destination marketing within the city and our region. Cost implications, there aren't any for the city except that we would be receiving $30,000 more from the county, which would then just be a pass-through to the DMO. So your call to action is at your discretion. Council can approve the resolution. You can not approve the resolution and forego the county's $30,000. And there's a potential motion in front of you. I did have a conversation with Commissioner Fowler, and he did mention that this is just the first part. They're actually having a discussion, I believe, tomorrow during their business meeting to discuss a potential annual installment to the city. And discussion of dollars is not confirmed yet, but it could be around $50,000. So this was just really to help the DMO with starter costs and other things getting off the ground. The Board of Commissioners is interested in having another IGA in the future that will provide their intent to help out on an annual basis. With that, Mary, concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions? Brian?
So just to be clear, this IGA is for startup costs only, not for the DMO operations.
This IGA is for DMO, whether they use for startup operations.
Is the county considering the $30,000 their year one contribution to DMO?
That is ultimately up to the Board of Commissioners to determine on whether or not they're also going to add another amount in this first year of operation.
Okay. The only reason I brought up is because every number I've heard up till tonight was $50,000 and now $30,000. So I was curious, when and how that change occurred.
Well, that change occurred during one of their business meetings. They made a motion and moved forward with the $30,000. They're having further discussions with regards to an annual contribution.
Thank you.
Valerie?
I was just going to clarify that for you did. It's the $30,000 that they put for the cost, which they were taking out of their ARPA fund, if I'm not mistaken. And then the second part of it will be what they're going to commit annually and from where. So they are two distinct funds, but this was only for the startup or beginning costs that may need to happen.
Joel?
I move to adopt the
Not
resolution.
yet. We haven't done public comment. Do you have any questions?
Public comment. I always get that wrong.
I know, I'm going to make you wait like 2 seconds, but are there any other questions? Would anybody from the public like to speak on this issue? All right, Joel, you're up.
I move to adopt the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Josephine County to receive destination marketing organization funding support.
Rick with the second. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Joel, let's get the ball rolling. How do you vote?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
DJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
All right. Thank you to the Board of Commissioners for supporting the DMO. All right, next up, we are going to make an appointment to the CEDC, or the Collaborative Economic Development Committee. And in front of each of you, you should have a kind of preliminary ballot, yellow piece of paper with 3 names of applicants for this position. We have Ronald Gordon, Colleen Martin, Gordon Tiffany, and Colleen Martin has been serving on the committee. Previously, the committee recommended her to be reappointed as she has been engaged in health and is knowledgeable of Grants Pass businesses and is currently serving on the American Recovery Plan Act Task Force representing the CEDC. So if you kindly select your preference and write your name on your paper and pass it down the way, I will read the initial round of nominations in just a moment here.
Hey, Kurt, you're liaison to CEDC. Is there anything that you wanted to add to this recommendation or application process?
No, I mean, the committee did recommend, make their recommendation after discussion about all the candidates.
Make sure I got all of that here. 3, 4. All right. 8, it's unanimous. Colleen Martin. With that, we'll turn it over to council for a formal nomination. Valerie.
I make a motion to approve Eileen Martin to the CEC Committee.
Second from Rick. Thank you. Any discussion? Valerie.
I would just like to add that Colleen has been a big part. She is very active with the businesses and real estate. She's also the chamber representative for the whole entire of Josephine County to the state of Oregon. So, I mean, she is definitely a plus on that committee. And I'd like to see other people be interested, and that's great, I mean, eventually, but she has been a very important part of that committee. So I'd like to see her stay.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right, Valerie, the motion, how to vote?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
BJ?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
And Rob?
Yes.
Thank you. Colleen Martin is appointed to the committee. Next up, we have public comment. And I'll read first. This is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item for the council. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not to individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, council will have an opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. That said, Rika Brown, you are up first.
Rika Brown, Grants Pass. Too many people have told us lately that breathing through masks is bad for us. Carbon dioxide supposedly being bodily waste. Our bodies have several organs that expel waste: the urinary system, the lower intestine, and sweat glands. Lungs do not expel toxic waste, mostly just unused air, carbon dioxide, and water. Carbon dioxide should not be maligned as waste. It plays a vital role in the body's ability to get oxygen to its tissues. Hemoglobin grabs and holds oxygen tightly to carry it through the body. It can't let go of oxygen until the blood is sufficiently acid with carbon dioxide. This is how oxygen gets to where it is most needed. Sinuses regulate how much air goes in and out with erectile tissues that inflate and narrow the airways when they detect too much smoke and dust. They filter out pollutants and germs with mucus that is swept down to the throat to be swallowed. They moisten the air and warm it to body temperature. When carbon dioxide is low, sinuses inflate and slow breathing, allowing it to build up in the bloodstream so oxygen can get to the body's tissues. If there isn't enough carbon dioxide, more oxygen gets expelled, and one feels like one can't get enough air. This is one reason why one should always breathe through the nose, not the mouth. The mouth is made for eating, drinking, and speaking. Its ability to breathe is for emergencies when the nose cannot. It does not clean the air, warm it, or slow its entry or exit. The mouth inhales and exhales too fast, expelling too much carbon dioxide from the blood and stopping oxygen from getting into tissues. The right kind of mask works much like the sinuses and helps them function better. This kind of mask has a large breathing pouch down to the chest that holds the warm, moist, relatively clean, slightly acidic air from our lungs, making the sinuses in the lungs more comfortable and opening the sinuses. The cloth holds moisture from the breath that catches particles and holds them as well. We absorb only a quarter of the oxygen we breathe at normal breathing rates, so there is still plenty left in your breath for you to use. and increased from 400 to 40,000 parts per million by the body, carbon dioxide still doesn't hurt anyone. Thanks to James Nestor and his book, Breath, for the workings of the body. Opinions about masks are based on my own experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Stephen Nelson.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. This is a follow-up from my last reading at the other council meeting. I wrote down a previous phone call message from Laura Glover. I believe it was 3 years ago. So I would like to read that phone call message to me. I want to give you a follow-up on what we will be doing on our demolition permits. I was able to talk to 2 DEQ representatives. They talked about the new rules that will be coming into play. The old practice had been to give a demolition permit and advise the contract person to contact DEQ. Obviously, that didn't work. I've watched dozens of illegal demolitions over the years. And now we will require that they have shown that they have met their asbestos survey requirement and that they have either a water truck or some other approved mitigation on site to control the dust on site pursuant to DEQ regulations and also our code regulations. I was more hopeful when the ordinance amendment passed about 3 years ago. I worked for 2 years to get that to pass. And I was seeing signs that maybe this will actually work. Hoses on the ground, water trucks being used at job sites. As I spoke previously, the Travis Boersma project made me realize this ordinance is not being enforced. Right out in open space, I watched demolition happening illegally. There's no sense in this. All they needed was a water truck at the site to keep dust down safely. There was a vendor over here selling at the fairgrounds. There were people walking over here. The only way an ordinance can work is for it to be enforced. It's common sense. Make developers follow the law, and the city needs to enforce the law. The only reason I mentioned Travis Boersma is he is a developer. He has a responsibility to make sure his projects are safe and legal. There's no way of getting around that. Contractors need to do that too, but Travis Boersma is first and foremost in this. So please enforce the law. Thank you.
Thank you. Opportunity to review public comment. Valerie.
Thank you, Steve. I do remember, and I had a conversation with him afterwards, because unfortunately, we live in a world where has to be, somebody has to see, just like he did, and say, complaint. Am I correct that that's kind of how this is as well, that we just assume, since they know in their process that they're supposed to do that it happens? So I'm just kind of following up and saying, how does that, because I'm assuming, I know that especially with being understaffed in so many directions, we don't have somebody on every single site to watch that. So is there a process, as he saw, where he said it wasn't being forced, that he can do a complaint, or how does it work?
So we do require a permit for a demolition. I am going to, I'm just taking some notes here to follow up in terms of the inspection piece, because as I think as Mr. Nelson is referring to, I mean, it really requires the timing, similar to what we would do for if you're pouring concrete. There's certain times where you really need the inspector there. Many times the inspector comes after the fact, but in a demolition, it's more critical to have them actually on site. And so I will be following up with the building official to confirm exactly what we have in place for a demolition permit when that is in terms of the inspections. So I will get that information from the building official, report back.
Thank you.
Karen, did we receive any email?
Yes, there were 2 emails complaining about camping and trash in the city, 1 stating concerns about a property on Grandview, 5 regarding mask mandates, 1 request to change the city water rates, 1 questioning the future use of the old Henderson gas station property, and 4 requests from a GP Climate Advisory Committee.
Thank you. All right, next up, consent agenda. Give Karen just a minute to get it up on the screen there.
Let's see, we have item A is resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Vacant Electric Incorporated for electrical maintenance services. And we have minutes from the city council meeting, 3 from Urban Area Planning Commission, and 1 from Bikeways and Walkways. And with that, I make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second, Valerie, thank you. All right, DJ, how do you vote?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
All right. Next is items from, mayor council comments. TJ?
Just wanted to update council on the county American Rescue Plan Act task force. We met today at 3 o'clock. They've already received 7 applications for ARPA funding, so that's going really well. They finalized their application process, and there's still a little bit of work to do about scoring and how that's going to go. They have decided that they're going to take these 7 applications, score them, and discuss them for recommendation at next Wednesday's meeting at 3 o'clock. So that momentum is well underway. At the conclusion of that meeting, I realized that they're kind of light years ahead of us as far as our funding goes, so I want to encourage getting this on the agenda as soon as possible so we continue our momentum forward with deliberating uses for ARPA funding.
Anybody else? Valerie?
Yes, I do have a couple things I want to bring up. First of all, we had our quarterly Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium, which is known as OMPOC. And so there's a lot there talking about transportation, because that's basically what it is. And so we had made some recommendations to the federal government in terms of trying to bring transit more involved with the MRMPOs and to keep things going. So there was a lot that we discussed in terms of multimodal. I would like to compliment the Courier I've been talking for years that I felt they needed to put some information on transportation in the newspaper, and it was really nice to see the article talking about what we talk about when we go to those transportation meetings, which is, yes, we are talking about safety. We are talking about trying to get funding to help with our problem that we have out on Highway 199, and there's a lot of work going on to try to make that happen. Working with transportation and ODOT and all these federal agencies can take a lot of time, but there are a lot of things in the fire. A lot of things going on behind the scenes, and so we were really anxious to see what happens with Biden's plan moving forward. But there are things working with the state, and we are trying to utilize the money that we have to get that problem addressed, because I think that's the biggest problem that we see in our local area, and ODOT is working with us. So that was one thing that I want to talk about, and like I said, another thing I wanted to bring up, and two things, and I've talked, first of all, to let the person know who wrote about the climate task force, we have that on August 16th meeting. So putting together a climate task force is on the agenda. It is going to be discussed on August 16th. I also got a phone call from a person talking about the parking, and very excited about having some of dedicated parking, but they also brought up the fact that they'd like to have us at some point reanalyze and take a look at the baseline on what sort of parking there is for employees, you know, and as we move forward, is that going to change? Is that going to, you know, open up, and who's going to be responsible for that? So they were asking me some questions about that. You know, and not being on the task force, I talked a little bit with Rob because I know he's been very involved in DJ, but I'm just going to send that to you because I do think looking at those, looking at that is important in the overall picture. And then one other thing, I got a phone call with somebody which made me realize how little I know about annexation. And they're concerned that there are parts of the city have not been annexed in where they are paying for services, police and fire, but they can't vote. And that kind of seemed crazy to me. And so I had a discussion with Aaron, and we had several years ago, you might remember, Rob, they had an ordinance that was passed, I don't know if an ordinance or resolution, whatever it was, that in order for us to annex in, we have to go out to a public vote. And so if that's the case, I think that's something we need to have a conversation about, because there are people out there who are paying these and don't have the opportunity to vote on public safety or any of these things. And that's kind of doesn't seem right to me. So I would like to have some sort of a workshop or something down the road on the annexation, what parts of the city have been annexed in, which have not been annexed in. Anyway, I just think it's a conversation that needs to be had. So I assured her that we would kind of start the process of researching it and looking into that to find out how many people are affected by that and what process we have to go through. I just happened to read in the Medford Tribune this morning that they're having a meeting, this Medford City Council, and they are, because they don't have to go through the voting process and out for a vote, they are getting ready to annex in 240 acres of EFU into single-family housing, just like that, with a vote of the council. So, I mean, it was just interesting to see the differences that are there. So I just would like more information about that.
Thank you. Any other counselors? Vanessa?
Just wanted to take a moment to remind the community that we do have several openings on our committees. We have openings on Housing Advisory Committee, the Collaborative Economic Development Committee, and the Entry Advisory Committee with different deadlines and requirements for participation on those. So be sure to check those out. And to also revisit Monday's workshop, I would like to encourage everybody to sign up for emergency alerts. You do so at our VEM, ValleyEmergencyManagement.org. It just takes a couple of minutes.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I just wanted to share, I was in a meeting a couple days ago with a doctor at the hospital, and I was pretty surprised to learn that with the COVID new variant, the hospital is full, so much to the point that they have postponed elective surgeries, so they're kind of back to the situation they were in before, and I was surprised to hear that, so I just kind of want to share that with everybody, and I know that 3 counselors are wearing their masks today, so just more of a heads up.
I'll follow up with that because I have been playing a little bit of phone tag between the Oregon Health Authority and the governor's office, still trying to see if we can receive the $538,000 that the commissioners were not interested in receiving to promote vaccination. The commissioners have offered to help, especially Councilors DeYoung and Barrett-Shiger have offered to help us receive those funds if we're so inclined, but I do not have a clear path yet on whether or not we'll be able to or how. So still working on that, but like Brian said, the numbers of people here in the community who have the Delta variant or COVID in general are rising, and our hospitals are full. And unfortunately, you know, for those people who are not vaccinated, it can be the difference between being in the hospital or just being homesick for a few days. So I know people who have been vaccinated and yet still have become sick with the virus, but they are doing much better than those people who are in the hospital. So it is extremely important that we continue to have people in our local area get vaccinated. We certainly don't want to harm our businesses and have our businesses close again or go back to some sort of mask mandates if we can help it. And it really just requires everybody pitching in and getting a shot. I know personally I'm not a fan of shots. go to pretty great lengths to avoid them under most circumstances, but this one did not hurt at all. It was free, it was painless, and I've been healthy. So anyway, I just continue to work on getting those funds for our community and see if we can help increase our vaccination rate locally. Any other killers? Comments for staff?
I just want to thank council for your volunteerism, of course, being on council, but also a fair coming up. And I think there's the fair booth, which we have GP Jeopardy. It's the most popular fair booth in the county. And we're always busy with people, and you volunteered to be there. So most definitely the likelihood that if someone comes and visits our GP Jeopardy booth, you'll probably be meeting a council member also at the same time. So thank you for that. And we look forward to having a good time out there.
Anything else?
I think most are aware, but the caveman pool, if your conditions were asking, has been closed, kind of intermittently, but in particular with the smoke, and so just kind of keep an eye on that. If it's this level, the caveman pool's been closed, but otherwise we'll have it open when it clears up.
Yeah, let's hope for that clearing. A little bit of wind, not too much wind. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. DJ?
I move to adjourn.
Second. Vanessa, thank you. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned next Monday. See you next week.
I mentioned